Greetings all you movie junkies and entertainment lovers, and welcome to another top 10 video. You know, there are many great and infamous subgenres of horror and monster movies, and one of the most infamous and perhaps overused is of course the zombie subgenre. And much like any subgenre, everybody has their favorites. And for me, it is one that personally I'm quite fond of, even though there are many terrible ones, but there's also a lot of really great ones as well. So today we're going to be going through my top 10 personal all-time favorite zombie movies. So coming in at number 10 is Return of the Living Dead 3. The third entry in the Return of the Living Dead franchise, and this one is really interesting because, I mean, pretty much all of the Return of the Living Dead movies are very disconnected, and this film is kind of not really a direct sequel to the first movie or the second film. But what's really great about this movie is that it's essentially like the Romeo and Juliet of zombie movies. And it's directed by Brian Yuzna, who directed one of my all-time favorite 80s horror movies in Society, and he also produced the Reanimator films. And it's overall a really unique movie, and I think unfortunately the Return of the Living Dead title is what kind of kept it back, because a lot of people see the title Return of the Living Dead 3 and you're not really expecting much out of it. So when you get this actually surprisingly different and unique original story, it's a really pleasant surprise, and that was totally my reaction when I watched this film. It is definitely one that is worth checking out, even if you didn't like, say, the second Return of the Living Dead movie, because it really does stand well on its own as just a really great original fun zombie movie. And then at number 9 we have Land of the Dead. Now in my mind, this was the true last zombie movie that George Romero made. I know he technically made two others after this, Diary of the Dead and Survival of the Dead. And Survival of the Dead is okay, Diary of the Dead is a pretty weak found footage movie in my opinion. And it's certainly not as great as Dawn or Day. It very much felt like they were expanding on the idea of, you know, the smart zombies thing that was set up in Day of the Dead. So I liked that they kind of continued that idea and went further with it, and that's something that personally I really like that. And I would have loved to have seen them go just like full on Planet of the Apes with it and just have the zombies get smarter and smarter. And I almost feel like that's originally what they were going to do. This film overall, I think, is kind of overlooked, perhaps because it's not as iconic as those other zombie movies that Romero made. The only thing that I think kind of merits it a little bit is there was some CGI stuff that they used that does look very much of the time and a little bit dated, but for the most part I think it's a really great one. And then at number 8 we have Zombie Flesh Eaters, also known as Zombie 2, also known as just Zombie. It has a bunch of different titles. But Lucio Fulci's Zombie Flesh Eaters, which is my personal favorite title of all the different variations. I mean, Lucio Fulci in general is probably one of the most infamous names in Italian horror. And this, I think, was one of his best movies. And overall, there's like a whole subgenre of like Italian zombie movies, and a lot of them are really great, and they have a very unique and interesting vibe to all of them. And this movie was, in a way, it was kind of made as like a cash-in on the success of Dawn of the Dead at the time, that was called Zombie in Italy, which is why this was called Zombie 2 initially. And if you ever wanted to see a zombie fight a shark, that is actually something that happens in this movie, and a lot of the effects and stuff in this movie are great and really goopy and creepy, and it has an overall a really cool kind of aesthetic and vibe to it that is very unique and very different. And for some reason, you know, Lucio Fulci has this thing in all these movies where characters get like their eyes pierced out, which is, you know, pretty interesting signature to have in your films. And in this movie there's this infamous eye splinter scene that is so tough for me to watch. And then at number 7 we have The Beyond, sticking with Lucio Fulci and Italian horror. It's about this hotel that's supposed to be in Louisiana that unfortunately happens to be on one of the 7 gates to hell. I mean, you gotta hate it when that happens. More supernatural territory than, say, Zombie Flesh Eaters, which was more of a standard zombie movie. This is more of just kind of, creepy things in general, like the gates of hell are opening, and that is the reason why, we've got zombies in this. And there is, even more creepy and weird moments in this. I was talking about how, Lucio Fulci has his signature of eyes getting punched out and eaten. Well, in this movie, you've got a guy who ends up getting spiders eating his eyes. So really great, wonderful, atmospheric, creepy movie. And definitely one of the best movies of its kind and one of Lucio Fulci's best films. So if you love zombie flesh eaters, then this, takes you even further beyond. And then at number 6, we have City of the Living Dead. Now this film, again, very much the same thing of the beyond of the gates of hell opening, and it has a very similar kind of atmosphere and vibe and very similar kind of effects and a similar aesthetic. And part of that is because this and the Beyond are actually part of essentially a trilogy of films that were made by Lucio Fulci that's known as the Gates of Hell trilogy, and the other chapter being The House by the Cemetery. It was really tough for me to choose between this and the Beyond because they're so, unique and similar to one another, but also very different from one another. To me, one of the best Italian horror movies in general that I've seen. Not that I've seen tons of Italian horror films, but of all the ones I have seen, this is absolutely, one of my personal favorites. So if I ever do a top 10 Italian horror movies list in general, you can bet that this will definitely be high up on the list. But it's also just a really great, creepy zombie movie. And then at number 5, we have Night of the Living Dead. Now, this is not the original Night of the Living Dead, though. This is actually the remake that was directed by Tom Savini. The original Night of the Living Dead is, of course, an iconic horror movie, probably one of the most infamous and iconic horror movies ever made. And I'm not taking anything away from its importance, and I do think it is a great film. But that being said, I honestly do prefer the remake. And I know I'm not alone in that, but I know there's still a lot of people that see that as blasphemy. Like, how could you possibly say that? But I think from just a simple filmmaking standpoint and a pure technical level, I honestly think that this movie is just better in every way. Even though it is not even half of really what Tom Savini wanted to make, I still think it's a great film nonetheless. Now, I mean, I never say that it's like, vastly superior to the original film, but I honestly do think it is a superior movie overall. Then at number 4, we have Night of the Creeps. It's almost more of a science fiction horror movie, but it's basically kind of got zombies in it, but they're more sort of hosts of these alien creatures. So it's not a traditional zombie movie in any sense, but it is just a great 80s horror movie in general that's got lots of great moments. Got Tom Savini in there. Tom Savini, of course, is just a legend when it comes to cult horror movies, particularly cult horror movies of this decade, and he is just fantastic in this film. And I overall just really love the whole aesthetic of it and the humor of it, and it's just a really great, unique little horror film. And again, I recognize that it's not really what you would think of as a traditional zombie movie, but I still think you could say that it's kind of a zombie horror film, but it's something that did it in a different way. And then at number 3, we have Dawn of the Dead. To many people, like the gold standard of how you do a zombie movie, and it is absolutely one of my probably all-time favorite horror movies ever, not just favorite zombie movies. You can see how influential it was on not just, the zombie genre, but just horror movies in general. And of course, it has one of the most infamous lines in horror movie history, or maybe even movie history, which of course is,
"When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth."
I mean, it's just an iconic, great movie. And then, of course, you got the whole plot of the motorcyclists coming in there and wreaking havoc, and the whole setting of it, the whole setup of it. It's just one of those, great classic horror movies, and absolutely, the gold standard when it comes to zombie movies. But there was just two other films that slightly beat it out for me. So then at number 2, we have Day of the Dead. It was really tough for me to choose between Dawn and Day because I practically like them both equally, but I think I just ever so slightly prefer the setting and the tone and style of Day just a little bit more than Dawn. They're practically on par for me, and I absolutely just love the soundtrack in this. The soundtrack by John Harrison is just one of like probably my favorite movie soundtracks ever, and it honestly fits pretty well with the movie overall. Again, you've got so many great just infamous little character moments in there, and this is also that set up the idea of course, you got the bub zombie, who of course was the first of the smart zombies, and they later expanded on that idea in Land of the Dead. And I really like that, and the effects in this are absolutely like top notch. It could have very easily been number 1, but there's just one other film that just ever so slightly beat it out for me, but it is pretty much, to me, the gold standard of zombie movies. And then at number 1 is The Return of the Living Dead. It's just like one of the all-time great 80s horror movies in general, and it totally reinvented the whole zombie genre and concept in all the best ways possible. It's interesting to me because the Romero zombies are still to this day like the most sort of traditionally used zombies in movies. So in a way, this movie is still very unique in its portrayal, and I just love the whole meta aspect of it having the movie of Night of the Living Dead within the movie, and that was a film that was like based on the real events and stuff. Like, I just love the whole setup and concept of it. I think it's so unique and interesting, and it is so dark and yet so freaking funny at the same time. Like, there's just so many great lines and moments in this, and it's one of those movies that just never gets old. Like, every time I watch it, it still just works, and I love how cynical and dark and funny it is, and how unique it is. Not just one of my all-time favorite horror movies, but also my personal favorite zombie movie of all time. Alright guys, there you go. That was my top 10 all-time favorite zombie movies. Feel free to jump in the comments down below and let me know what your top 10 all-time favorite zombie movies are. And until next time, be sure to consume as much entertainment as humanly possible, and I'll see you in the next video.